Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from central British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, oh, we know where Canada is. And British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right, that's where it is. Beautiful, beautiful province. Today we got an amazing guest. His name is Dr. Matt Kutz. And hey, Matt, can I call you Matt?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Matt is an award-winning author, educator, researcher, and a speaker with a Ph.D. in global leadership who has spent nearly 3 decades helping people developing stronger leadership, deeper perspective, and the ability to navigate adversity with confidence. I love it, Matt. So tell us all about yourself and where did it all start? Where did you come from? Where did you get your education? And obviously 3 decades of experience as it evolved and brought you to today as a popular author, obviously, and speaker and presenter. One of the books that comes to mind is this one here, and I'm sure that Matt is going to talk about that one as well.
Yeah. So that book you're just showing there, Contextual Intelligence, won the Leadership Book of the Year Award for Innovation and Cutting Edge Perspective back in 2013. We just released the 2nd edition of it just a few months ago, so we're really excited about that. But as far as my background goes, as you mentioned, I know leadership is a huge thing for me. I love leadership. I love studying it. I picked it up from my dad. You know, growing up, he was a huge strategic war buff. He liked to study wars and generals and things like that. So I picked a lot of that up from him, and I've been studying it my whole life. So just fell into it. My background is kind of sports medicine is my real background, athletic training, and in Canada you call it athletic therapy, and just been a lot of fun for me.
So where are you located, Matt, or where are you now, or where were you before, where are you now?
Yeah, so actually, I'm in Toledo, Ohio right now, which is home. I just got back from Australia yesterday, so I'm still jet lagged, so I don't know what day it even is. But it's great. So I live in Ohio, in the United States, and I work in Florida at Florida International University in Miami. So I kind of commute. Obviously, I teach mostly I teach in a doctoral program, so that allows me flexibility to travel and live a distance away. So I only have to be on campus for our intensive residencies and things like that.
Yeah, some of the things that are interesting to me in particular is you look to be fit and healthy, and for me what is important is obviously I was born in 1940, so I'm nearly 86 years young, I call it. I'm into being active in the gym. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. This is one of the books that I wrote. I think it's my 4th one, actually. And that's a picture of me here. And again, even now still, I've been training for quite a while, competed bodybuilding and physique, qualified for the Nationals and the Arnolds just before, 2 years before the COVID came, and then obviously COVID came, it slowed me down a bit. Now again, I'm training to hopefully in 2027 qualify again for the Arnolds. And
awesome. I believe we just had the Arnold Classic is in Columbus down here, and I think it was just last month.
It was.
Yeah.
And so, and I've been there, I've seen it, and it's amazing. And what inspires me always is Arnold, obviously, and for all those reasons. And then the other part which is important to me, that's why I wrote the book, Living Young, Dying Old, is that quality of life ultimately is the most important. And that, and a lot of people say, I'm too old for this, or I'm this or that, I can't do this, I can't do that. I say, everything is possible, and you should be the attitude. And my foundation is attitude, passion, work ethic, and what will follow is success.
That's right. I'm absolutely convinced of that as well.
So tell us more about, I look behind you in your bookcase. Are you in your office there, or what setting is it? Because every time I see this, it inspires me.
Yes, that's my home office. I'm in my home office today, and yeah, that's my library. That's only half of it. The other wall has much more, and then I have a bunch in the basement as well. So yeah, when you've been doing this as long as I have, it's you collect a few books over the years. So it's been one of the things I love to do.
I'm like that as well. So the other part that I like about your bio is your focus on entrepreneurial leadership, in particular contextual intelligence. What does that really mean, contextual intelligence?
Yeah, that's a great question. So contextual intelligence for me is about understanding your environment. And, there's a lot that goes into that. A big part of the environment is what you bring to it. So many people don't recognize that when they enter into a space, that space changes, maybe for the only reason is because you have brought your presence to it. And what I like to help people understand is how to understand that context, what's actually going on, and how their presence changes that, and then teach them and begin to help them understand their own mindset, how they think and what they think affects not only themselves, the people around them, the context that they're in. And then, of course, there's several models and frameworks that go with that we can talk about or not talk about, that really unpacks the core of what contextual intelligence is. But in a nutshell, it's basically understanding your environment as it's happening and diagnosing it as it's happening, instead of thinking about it after the fact, but paying attention in real time to begin to see what's happening so you can interact appropriately.
So what comes to mind if I think of my own life is I was born in 1940 in northeastern Holland, just before the war started. As you know, in 1938-39, this dictator Adolf Hitler thought that what they should do is incorporate Poland, which should belong to Germany, and it was obvious at that point that he probably would go further to democratic rules in Western Canada. And my mom and dad were married in 1938. They were in love. My dad worked in a little lumber mill. My mom obviously was at home, and they very quickly had two children, a boy and a girl, one born in 1939, one in 1938, and then pregnant with me. The Dutch army called my dad into the army in expectation that Hitler possibly would invade Holland, which they did. And the last time that he was seen was just before the bombing of Rotterdam.
Oh, wow.
Where Adolf Hitler decided to bomb Rotterdam because, as far as he was concerned, they didn't capitulate quick enough, so he bombed the city of this amazing city, killed thousands of people, and so for 5 years they wouldn't know if he lived or died. And so my mom was on her own, was then pregnant with me still. I was born November the 1st, 1940, and still 3 little kids, and make a world way to the war years. And I remember from the time I was 3.5 years old, hundreds of planes overhead, bombing. We were within 10-15 minutes from the border, northeastern part of Holland, as you visualize it. We could see cities burning, and in the distance. And my mom would take us outside on the flat roof because she felt safer outside than inside. Hundreds of bombers. And then the next thing I remember, hunger. In 1944, when they had cut off all the food supply and all the, I still remember, even still today, 81 years later, I can still feel hunger and still the anxiety of all the things around it. And we as kids, the three of us would go every morning into the railroad yards, pick up anything edible and burnable. That was the foundation. And then from there on in, I remember the liberation of Holland by the Canadian Army, as we all know, 1944, June of 1944, the Allied forces, the United States, Canada, the UK, landed in Normandy at great cost to liberate Western Europe. And so the Americans went east and south, and the Canadians north, through France, Belgium, western part of Holland, to where we lived in the north, and it was brutal. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. And then the part that changed my life was April the 12th, 1945, when we were liberated by the Canadian Army. And I knew from that point forward, as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada, and I did. And so the other part that I remember is the rebuilding of Europe after the devastating of war that killed 60 million people, 60 million people, 6 million Jewish people were dragged into concentration camp and murdered around that period as well. And then, so it became, for me, an experience that always stayed with me. Academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3, I failed grade 7 3 times. And then they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And I said, well, maybe some people said, send him to the mentally challenged school. And my parents said, no, we're not going to do that. And so my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory and said, maybe make him a furniture maker. So that's where they sent me at 12 and a half years old. And so I became a furniture maker. Again, a foundation piece. It took me 50 years later, at 62, when I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia, which also changed my life. I left for Canada, actually, in the summer, July of 1965, with nothing, to prove to me that I was just as smart as all the others, not smarter than them, and that I could do it on my own. And I did, left with very little money, wanted to go to the west coast of Canada, British Columbia, where all the trees are, and I wanted to build a sawmill. And so when I landed in Vancouver, went to the immigration office, and could speak English, didn't know soul, didn't have a job, and fortunately there was a German fellow, I could speak some German, and so I said, I want to build a sawmill. He said, go to Prince George, northern British Columbia. I did, and came off the bus here in Prince George, where I am now in this office. I have a place in Victoria and Vancouver and other places. I came off the bus and I had a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. But
That's awesome.
what I did have is attitude, always being positive, as I said earlier, passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%, work ethic. Even now, at nearly 86, I still work harder than anybody. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so the first thing that I do when I get outside, no matter where I am, no matter if I'm alone or the whole lot of people around me, I say I'm in paradise. Because North America, compared to the rest of the world and what I've seen and lived and believe, with all due respect to those people that think war is, when you have a war, once the war is over, everything goes back to normal. It simply doesn't. There is nothing more precious than peace and relative tranquility and stability politically, no matter what it is. But war is something that will stay with the people for generations to come, as they did with me and others. So, so then after I got diagnosed, as I indicated, that changed my life. At least now I know who am I. And so I became an author after that, a presenter. I already was successful in business. I became more successful, and it changed my life. And the point that I'm making is that neurodiversity issues relatively always have been with us, but relatively undiagnosed and not very much discussed really until about 5-10 years ago. ADHD, dyslexia, and others is all part of our makeup, and it's changing the education system to a certain extent and the recognition. So when I discovered it, the more I found out about it, the more I realized, at least for me, a lot of people say to me, how you do all the things that you're doing, including podcasting and all of that kind of stuff. I say it's ADHD, that's how I do it. So
almost
that's a bit of my background that brings me to you and others and saying, so share with us yours, because you've been immensely successful, not only in terms of laying the foundation in your education, or in my case, because of my life experiences along the way that have taught me dealing with issues and challenges along the way, which happen all the time, and particularly now, actually, with all the situations in North America, but still we are very, very fortunate.
Yeah, yes, we are. We are very fortunate. That's one of the things I too agree that this is still one of the best areas in the world to live, and we have a lot to be thankful for sure. And boy, what a story! I mean, talk about overcoming adversity and leading a life, kind of like an uphill battle. What an inspirational story. My own story is not quite as inspirational as yours, but it's noteworthy in that, I'm that kid who grew up in a home where we were just a middle class family. My no one in my world, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nobody ever went to college or anything like that. We were all factory workers, so to speak. And so I was expected to do the same thing. And I remember when I kind of made the announcement to my family that I wanted to go to college, kind of got scoffed at a little bit and scorned a little bit, from my uncles and family about, well, that's not what we do. We're not that type of family. And so that was, but I overcame that really quickly and went through that. Had a great academic experience. I too wasn't the most brilliant student. I had to work a lot. Now mine was just, I didn't have any diagnoses. I was just lazy. I just was just lazy, and it caught up with me. So I had to do a little bit of remedial work early on, but got caught up with that and did well. Worked in, as I mentioned, worked in the sports medicine space. So I have the credential as an athletic trainer, certified athletic trainer. We actually have a collaboration with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association, and I serve actually as the president of the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy, which has collaborations with athletic training in the United States, athletic therapy in Canada, athletic sports rehabilitation in the United Kingdom, and athletic therapy in Ireland. And these 4 countries have a collaboration where we work on sports medicine together, athlete health. I also am a certified strength and conditioning specialist. Went through a lot of different experience, worked with the Olympic teams in the United States a couple different times, traveled to Brazil with our Olympic team, traveled to different places with our Olympic teams, been all over actually, had a lot of fun. South Korea, another place, a lot of international things in my background. I was really exposed to that through, again, my father, when we were very young, started taking us on like these short-term humanitarian mission trips, which really developed kind of a love for me for international travel, international relationships and things like that. So as I said, I just got back from Australia just just yesterday, and spent some time there. I have faculty appointments in at Griffith University in Queensland, Australia. I've taught at universities in Peru, China, United States, Canada, South Africa, a bunch of different places, Rwanda.
So, Matt, where does this sport come into this picture, since the focus appears to be substantially in those areas? Did you have a background in sport? Was it your family? What attracted you to sports in particular? Now, I can relate to that in a sense because obviously I'm active in sport, but only became that after I got a scare about, I had a case of diverticulitis, when I was 58 years old, and, that had ruptured. And, I got an operation, took 20 centimeters out of my colon, and the doc said, you came this close. And so that triggered me to become much more active in sports. I always played, when I already was in Europe, I played soccer, obviously, judo, and a number of other things. But then at 58 years old, I started to become very, very active and going to the gym on a regular basis 4 or 5 times a week and building quality of life and fitness.
Right. Yeah. So for me, I always was an athlete in high school, played sports throughout high school. Standard in the United States, we play like little league baseball, soccer, things like that. Played that my whole life. When I got into high school, I began to focus on baseball and soccer. I played a lot of soccer. I was a goalkeeper in soccer. And then in college, I was able to play soccer in college as a goalkeeper. And I played that and really had a good time. So sport was always my background. But then picking the major that I chose to take me in the direction and the career that I ended up into was kind of an accident because I didn't know that athletic training was a profession at the time. I actually entered college thinking I was going to do sport psychology. I knew I wanted to work with sport. And I wanted to work with like mental performance and things like that. And I remember enrolling back in the day when I went to college. It was, we didn't have computers like we have today. You actually, when you registered for your classes, you stood in line in the student union with a card that had, different numbers on it, things like that. And you went to an actual registrar person, a human, and talked to them about what classes you like, what you didn't like, stuff like that. And I was talking to this fella at the table, and he's like, "Oh, you need to try." I explained to him my interest, and he said, "Oh, you should try this athletic training class." And I said, "Okay, I'll try it." I mean, I have no. He goes, "Yeah, it's just an introduction. Don't worry about it. If you don't like it, then it won't hurt. You can still take other courses, and it won't take you off your track or anything like that." I was like, "Okay, well, I'll try it. Because you recommend it. I have no knowledge of it whatsoever." But it was like the second or third day of class. I remember feeling and telling myself, I found my people. I found this is what I want to do. And for the past 35 years, I have been a licensed and credentialed athletic trainer, working with sports teams, working with athletes. Love it.
Can you imagine this, Matt, purely because of coincidence? You stood in the lineup. Probably there were 3, 4 different tables, and you ended on that one table talking to an individual that guided you on instinct or whatever it was on his part into a direction which determined virtually your life and the direction of your life.
Totally. Yeah.
Amazing.
I mean, I take that very seriously, and something that, whether you call it serendipity or destiny or whatever, I consider that an important life moment. This particular advisor was the women's soccer coach. And I bet you, I don't know this as a fact, but I'm willing to bet that he was probably the only one of those advisors who even knew that this course existed and how to fit my interests with that. So very much a very, very, I like to say, I don't like to say lucky. I like to say blessed. It was a very blessed moment for me that took me in a trajectory that actually gave definition and to my life. And it really, really helped me from that point on, working with athletic trainers. I begin to work with track and field teams, football team, American football teams. I work with baseball. I work with all the sports there are. And that took me then into my graduate program. It's not this way anymore, but back then in the early 90s, when you wanted to get a master's degree in athletic training or athletic training related field, the athletic departments at large universities needed to have supplemental staff to help out. So I was offered a graduate assistantship, which means I could take my master's degree at no cost to me. The university paid for the degree, waived all the fees, and then paid me a small stipend so I could, rent an apartment and get gas for my automobile. And so that's what I did. And by the time I was done, I had a few years of experience. I had a master's degree, and then I went on from there and began to work. My first job was in a hospital, outpatient physical therapy, working in the sports injuries, things like that. And eventually I went out
in Ohio, Matt?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. All in Ohio. Yeah. And Indiana. I'm sorry. So I got my degree in Indiana, but I came back to Ohio right away.
Your master's?
Not far from Ohio. Yeah, for my master's.
And then on back to
and yep. And did that. And then it was a few years into that and doing that I just, fell in. I mean, I've always loved it and it was great. And it was after, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years of working, in different settings. Most of my settings were in high school. I also did some collegiate work and other things. But after that, I had an opportunity to go to Colorado Springs to work with the Olympic training, to work with our athletes at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, which is a great facility. In fact, arguably United States has one of the best training facilities in the world, and our Olympic teams tend to do pretty well by and large. And so being there, it was just a 2-week little internship that, again, a lottery-based system on how my license number came up and I was able to go. And I met a guy there who was very instrumental. He was the guy, we were roommates. They ended up being roommates. We didn't know each other from Adam, other than we were both athletic trainers, and we kind of hit it off. He was much more senior than I was, and actually tried talking me into becoming a professor. He's like, you'd be a really good professor in this. I said, no, I had a hard time in college. I only got my master's degree because it was free, and I had to work through that and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, and I just want to do my job. I'm not interested in that kind of thing. And he really worked on me and really tried to convince me. He goes, you would really be a good professor. You should really, really think about it. So I did. Long story short, eventually he talked me into applying for some faculty jobs, and I did, and I actually got one. I applied for several, and one came up. Go ahead.
So let me say for our friends watching us from around the world, saying that, so there you had your master's, and so then a doctorate, and then the Ph.D. or the professor comes into the picture, correct me if I'm wrong, so that you were then taking a Ph.D., which basically is doing a major submission on a certain area that then qualifies you by peers that grants you then the title, if you wish, of PhD. So you have your doctorates, and addition to that, because of that further background, the PhD.
Yeah. So that's how that worked was he was really getting on me to apply for a faculty. So I applied for my first faculty job without a PhD, and I actually got the job. And after my first year at that job, I'm doing my annual review, with my dean, and she was like, hey, Matt, you're doing a great job. We love what you're doing, but you're really kind of stuck where you're at because you don't have a PhD yet. Why don't you go get a PhD? And that way we can give you a higher salary. We can promote you. Because at that time I had a young family. My wife and I were just having our children and all that. So I went home and talked to my wife. I said, "Hey, honey, what about a PhD?" And she was like, "Absolutely not. No way." She's like, "We've done school. We're done with school. You've got a young family. You're working full time."
Yeah, make
so
money.
It took me a little while, but I began to work on her and work on her and work on her. And eventually she agreed. And so I did. I enrolled in a PhD program. Now, mind you, I'm working full time. So I kind of did the long route a little bit, which I think is actually better, by the way, because a lot of PhDs, and I'll get in trouble from my colleagues and friends when I say this, but a lot of PhDs come out with a PhD with very little to no actual work experience. And that always bugged me. So I wanted to make sure that I had some work experience to go behind my PhD, not just the credentials, but some actual work experience there. So I was able to do that. And what was interesting is because I had to work full time, I really couldn't take the PhD that most of my contemporaries would have taken. For example, in rehabilitation science or exercise physiology, I had to take one that actually would fit my lifestyle at the time. And it ended up being a PhD in leadership, global leadership.
Now,
so that's where this.
Want to interrupt you for a second, Matt. I love it. The discussion here, obviously, is that as I said earlier, I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times, and then I want to work as a laborer. They all kind of look down on me, saying John will not amount to much, so, and including the teachers, and I love teachers, even my younger daughter is a teacher, but they didn't fully understand then neurodiversity issues and then PTSD and the child issues and a whole lot of other things. Is that then obviously, if I look back to, I'm now approaching 86. I'm still 85. In November, I will be 86. So I started working physically when I was 12 in lumber manufacturing, and now still am involved. I have a number of companies. So for 74 years, I've been actively involved in different areas and different countries for all intents and purposes. Obviously, starting over in in Canada from with nothing, and then I got the honor in 2019. The University of British Columbia gave me an honorary doctorate in laws. Awesome. Can you imagine, for this guy failing grade 3 and failing grade 7 3 times? And then if I look back being successful, I can say that to you without being snobbish about it, but obviously I have been. So I earned my professorship and physically working from the 12th year till 74. So I'm proud of that for me. And as you indicated, all the struggles going along the way, but you had the practical experience. The reason that I make the case is that sometimes what is undervalued in a sense is that the value of practical experiences in combination with learning in a non-conventional way to then building experience leading to successful. Being successful is also a path to go that can be recognized.
Yes. And
I'm
a big proponent of that myself. Again, never forgetting kind of where you come from, being the first person in my family to even ever try college, all those kinds of things. I had good support, but my parents and my family were always just scratching their head of, what's Matt going to do, kind of a thing. What can you do with a college degree? Because, we know how to make money. You work in a factory, you start, but what's a college degree? Yeah, exactly. And so that was interesting. And I still carry that with me today because, like I said, it's a little annoying for me to have a lot of these highly educated people with no work-life experience or value to add. So that was important to me. To keep that and to work at that. So So I had that, and I agree. Life, I think, is an adversity in particular is the most important teacher. In fact, I'm working on a new book right now. I have the draft copy here called Designed Disruption. And basically what that book is about is how we can curate or design disruption and how disruption actually adds value to our life. Because I think it's the struggles, the overcoming, the adversity that actually make us better people. In fact, just a few months ago, yeah, Against All Odds, a perfect, yeah, exactly right.
The first book that I wrote, it's not about how successful John is, but rather
Exactly.
I have to rewrite it again because I got several chapters that are happening as we speak that should be part of this as well.
Added to it. The second edition, yeah. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, calls that the law of undulation, and how life is basically a lot of ups and downs, and we want to think life is a straight line. It's point A to point B, and I've never met anybody. I don't even know where that idea comes from because I've never met a person who went from A to B without any ups and downs, without any step backs, in fact.
So I'm showing Matt now a book that I did, the fifth fund, and I'm working on the sixth fund as well. Is $1 billion. I call it that. And people pick it up from the shelf and say, "Oh, I want to see it." All about communication skills.
Yeah.
The critical part, communication skills. The reason that the 6 or 7 individuals that I refer to, not write about, but refer to, the reason that they became successful is not so much foundation, it's in spite of it or because of it, neurodiversity in particular, but also communication skill, either natural or acquired or learned, made them successful. And I felt, and I'm a big believer in that. That's why I wrote the book. Very, very successful, bestseller on Amazon. And so my question, what comes to mind if I see you and hear you and looked at your bio, obviously very, very impressive in terms of your background and what you learned. But strikes me, I'm not surprised about one of the main parts that is impressive to me is your communication skills. And so my question to you, in a lot of cases, it's not being taught well, in my opinion, but it's probably the most important part leading to success, knowledge, and all the other parts, not only in business, but in relationships and throughout your life, is were you always a good communicator, or is it acquired, and how important is it in your belief?
Well, I'll start with the last part. How important is it? It's essential. I completely concur and agree that if you can't communicate, you can't navigate life. I mean, it really is the new literacy. If we can't construct our thoughts in a way that we can articulate them to other people successfully so that they can see what we see. And that's really how I always teach this from the frame of what I call foresight. So foresight is the ability to see something out there in the future that someone else can't yet see. So that's one skill, to see what other people can't see. I think what makes someone successful is not just seeing what others can't see, but then also being able to communicate that. So I can see what others can't see, and then I have to bring it back and learn to communicate it. There's a lot of people who fantasize about the future, right? Who have this idea of what life might be like, could be like, maybe, et cetera. But then they come back and they try to explain it to people, and they can't. They can't articulate it. They can't get them to believe. They can't get them to see. And I do believe there's something very special about the person who can see what's out there and communicate it well to other people. That's how you get people to come along with you, to support you, to build, to contribute to what you're trying to build, et cetera. So communication is absolutely essential. And in my case, I would say it's probably acquired. I think, like most people, you're a little intimidated. I do have a natural flair. People have told me, I'm a good communicator, and when I'm on the stage, especially, I do like public speaking and things like that. But I had to learn it the hard way. I mean, I remember barely passing my speech class in college. We had to take a public speaking class, and absolutely terrified, and how much I've grown from then to now. And of course, that was 30-ish years ago. But now, yeah, because 96, yeah, it was 29 years ago that I was in college, taking my public speaking class and feeling like, I don't know how to do this. He wants us to do an extemporaneous speech, and he wants us to do an outline speech. It's like, you just up there and you just read from the paper and you hope people will hear you, but you can't communicate that way. And that's not just on the stage. That's just in relationships and in community with your neighbors and business partners and whatever. You have to be able to articulate an idea clearly. So for me, I learned that through trial and error. And I have been very intentional, and I read a lot on communication, and then I practice what I read. I put myself, in my case in particular, I put myself in difficult situations where I'm forced to communicate in ways that I normally might not. So for example, I've done like TEDx talks and different things like that, but I've also done these, I think they call them like butterfly. There's a name for them. I forget what they are. I think they're butterfly events where you just basically get a topic and you have to go up there and just present for 5 minutes straight on a topic, which is very challenging to do when you don't have you're being timed and you don't have a background. And so I do those things, and I don't need to anymore, but I still do them to keep myself sharp. A funny story is when I was a junior faculty member, one of the things that the senior faculty would do to kind of torture us junior faculty members is anytime we were about to go make public remarks, whether it was at a faculty meeting or wherever it was, they would write a few words down on a scratch piece of paper. And these were like big fancy words, right? And right before you went up, they handed you this piece of paper and you looked at it. And if you didn't work those words into your remarks seamlessly and casually as if they were always supposed to be there, then you had to buy them lunch the next day. And so that was always challenging. I remember one time I was getting up to say something at one of the faculty retreats, and I get a piece of paper, and I open the piece of paper, and the words are heuristic and Budweiser Clydesdales. And I'm just like, how am I going to work these words into my comments, And so I was able to do it. But those are the kinds of things that keep people sharp, and so I would say I learned communication through trial and error, kind of acquired. But I will say now, in hindsight, that I really enjoy it. I'm good at it. I enjoy being in front of people. I enjoy the communication process. But I've worked on it intentionally, and I agree with you that it's something that has to happen.
So, giving my background, I grew up in northeastern Holland, speaking dialect. And I loved speaking dialect, but High Dutch is different. So when I got into, I was 2 years in the Air Force actually, drafted in Holland. But I was used to speaking dialect, and obviously I didn't go through schooling that required it. Grade 7 did not necessarily require it. And so then that was difficult for me to learn to speak High Dutch with an accent of dialect. Barely got that part under control, then I went to Canada. And so now I had to learn to speak English and understand it. And so then for me, probably 36 years ago, when I was in my late 40s, early 50s, I already was successful in business, but I had anxiety, lack of self-confidence, and I was not a good speaker or presenter. And I could maybe, with 3 or 4 employees, I was okay, but outside of that, I wasn't. And part of it was self-confidence, the other part and I was just not a good presenter and not a good speaker. So then a friend said to me, I want you to go with me to Toastmasters. I said,
Yeah.
Toastmasters? What's Toastmasters? He says, communication skills. So I did that when I was 50. So I say, are you going to ask me anything? Say, no, you just sit there. There is tens of millions of people that have been in Toastmaster clubs all over the place. I urge people that are watching us to look it up on Google. It's all about communication skills. So in any event, so I was sitting there and then watching about 20, 30 people interacting, doing presentations and other things. And then somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. And so, but I knew I had to, because this part was critical. And the next couple of meetings were the most difficult in my life. I could have crawled out of there on hands and knees, but I didn't. I stayed for 10 years. I became a distinguished Toastmaster, which changed my life. Yeah. And then in particular, it showed I'm a storyteller for one. And then the other way, I have a natural ability to be a good presenter. And I do like what you did, is that I love doing presentations. I always say with the presentation, they may not remember what I talked about necessarily, but they will never forget me, because I just stand there and read. I don't do that. I'm there, and I will make sure, I don't care if there is 20 or 2,000 people, they will all feel like I talk to each one of them individual.
Right. And, yeah, I've never done Toastmasters, but I'm a huge fan of Toastmasters.
And then the other part that is saying, what is Toastmasters all about? People ask me. And I say, it is first and foremost, the most important part is not being a speaker, but it is being able to interact, speaking on your feet for one, and then the other one is recognizing other people doing presentations and give constructive recourse and interacting. That's what it is all about. It's about that part first and foremost. And then the last one would be doing presentations. And I do the same as you do. If I do a presentation, even on topics, and that's part of Toastmastering actually, they give you a topic of whatever it may be. Always in my mind, I think about a presentation is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And different formats maybe, but that's what you do. And if it is a topic that used to be in Toastmaster, I have no idea what it means, then I'll make it like something that I believe it could be or should be. And then the other part in terms of looking forward, what did it do for me? It gave me, who am I? Was a big question. So it gave me that confidence. And then the other part is that it became a critical part of my life.
Yeah, I recommend Toastmasters to a lot of people. I've never done it, like I said, but I know it's a great organization. And I spent a lot of time in the early years doing free talks everywhere I could go. So, I mean, I do Rotary Club, Chamber of Commerce, Kiwanis Club, whatever it might be. And just volunteered to speak and just practice that way in front of a real audience. And it really has helped me. But to your point originally, is communication is in fact $1 billion skill, as you point out. And that's something that I think is important to learn. And even in my own dissertation process, yep, there it is, the $1 billion communication skills. And I think that's an apropos title, because it's true. The other thing I'll say is, so I started my Ph.D., finished that up, and got into a space that, once you get a Ph.D., people think you know something. You might not. A lot of people don't with them. but people just assume you do just because of the credential. And so right or wrong, or for better or for worse, that's an interesting part of it. But people just assume you know something. So I started to get some opportunities. And that's when my opportunity to travel with Team USA on different track and field things. And then all of a sudden, I found myself in a position, again, and long story I'll make short, but I found myself in a position of having been awarded a Fulbright scholarship, and which meant I moved, me and my family, and that time I had a 12-year-old son and a 10-year-old son, and we moved to Rwanda in East Africa, and we lived there.
Wow.
And we taught there for a while. I taught at the university there, got exposed to that, and then came back from that. Really had now a flavor for international travel and different things. And having worked with some Olympic teams internationally, now having lived in Rwanda, I had a sabbatical coming up a couple years later. And I used that sabbatical to go to Australia, where I became a faculty member at Gold Coast University Hospital there, taught there, and got a faculty appointment at Griffith University. And in fact, that's why I was just there and just returned. I was actually doing some lectures in the business college at Griffith University and on innovative thinking and innovative design around this idea of creativity and how it's connected to problem solving in complex systems. Healthcare is a very complex system, as everyone knows. So leadership and innovative thinking are very appropriate in those contexts.
Now, the other part, Matt, and our hour is going by far too quickly.
It is.
But a couple of things that I still want to touch with you on. Health and fitness, critically important. And what comes to mind in your case in particular, relating to being diagnosed with advanced metastatic, if I have that word correctly, prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. How did you find out? What happened? How did it take you forward? What do you recommend to other people going through their life as being aware of prostate cancer frequency?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, John. One of the things that it was November of 23, so not too long ago. I was actually training for a triathlon. And I've been an avid runner, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons. Triathlons are my favorite. And so I was training for a triathlon, and I was doing a bike. Today it was a bike training day. So I was out on my bike, and I was out in the countryside, just chucking away. And there was a farmer out there with his combine kind of treating his field, and he was coming towards the bike path, and he wasn't going to come over the bike path, but he was getting close enough where he was starting to turn around, head the other way, that I felt like I needed to swerve over on the bike path just to give a little bit more clearance. And at the speed I was going, you forget the rules of physics, I suppose, and my little swerve took me way far off the track and into the field, right? So anyways, I went into the field. I hit the high grass. I hit something in the dirt and the ground, and just whacked, just hit it hard. The bike stopped. I flew over the bike, broke the handlebars, bruised my ribs, dislocated some ribs, broke my hand, a lot of concussion, all this kind of stuff. So here I'm in the hospital, getting checked out, and I'm okay, but the big thing was I was recovering from that, still doing my training, because I was, after a little bit of a rest, I was able to train some more. So I still was doing some training, but I was back in the doctor. I was having chest pains, and I'm thinking, well, I'm in my 50s, man of a certain age, and chest pain, and you better get this checked out. So I called my doctor, and he reminded me, he goes, you're relatively healthy. I mean, he knew me well. He goes, are you sure it's not just the residual pain from your rib injuries when you crashed your bike? And I'm like, yes, that's what it is. I had instant relief, because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, maybe a heart issue. But then I realized, oh yes, that's what it is. It's definitely that. And but because I said that, and because of the healthcare system the way it is, we still had to check it out. So I'm doing the EKG on the treadmill and the leads, and them running on the treadmill, and they're doing all my tests. And turned out, yes, my heart was great. But he's there, he's looking at my medical chart, and he realizes that I never came in for my 50-year-old kind of well check. Because I was well. So why would I go to the hospital, But he's like, you never came in for, at 50 for your prostate screening, your colonoscopy, all these other things. So he's like, since you're here, can we just do that stuff now? And I'm like, sure, why not? So we did. And a few days later, I get a call from his nurse. And she's like, Mr. Kutz, I have bad news. Your PSA score, which stands for prostate specific antigen, is very, very high. In fact, we want you to see a urologist right away. So I'm not thinking it's a big deal because I'm healthy, I'm active, I have no symptoms. Prostate cancer comes with certain symptoms. Enlarged prostate comes with like frequent urination, sexual dysfunction, all these things. I had none of that. So I thought I was fine. Again, long story short is I find out that not only do I have prostate cancer, but it's incredibly advanced. Here I had it for a while and didn't even know it. And because I was so active and healthy, it kind of actually prolonged the symptoms and all that. And I never really knew it. So I was keeping it at bay a little bit. But by this time, my prostate was very large. And so they had to take it out right away. So I had a radical prostatectomy right away with the robotic surgery and all that kind of stuff. And I guess the inspirational part of that story is I had to do 40 days of radiation. And that was hard for me because I had to cancel everything I was doing for the next 40 days. So I had to be home for the hospital every day, same time for this radiation. And so I made a vow to myself that I would write 1,000 words every day for those 40 days. And I did. And what came from that was my newest book called Becoming Epic. And
show it to us again, Matt.
Yep. Yeah. I don't even have a copy with me here, but I've got it right over there. I'll leave the screen for 1 second and go grab it.
Yeah, grab it.
So here's the book, brand new book, Becoming Epic. And EPIC then is an acronym for excellent, perceptive, inspired, and compassionate. And it basically describes what I believe it takes to overcome adversity. You need to have
Where can we find it? Amazon?
Everywhere. Yep. It's on Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble, any bookstore. It's there. You can find it anywhere. Becoming Epic. And I wrote that during my cancer treatment. And out of this book, I know we're running out of time here. The other thing that my wife and I did, because we don't want to take anything lying down, we believe in a good attitude and fighting and being persistent and epic, being epic. And so we started a nonprofit foundation that we named Battle for the Bulge. And it'll play on words there. We think it's kind of funny as well as cheerful. But Battle for the Bulge is a prostate cancer awareness and education foundation that we raise money for prostate cancer research, education, and things like advocacy. And we do a 5K run every year. And so we go back to the health and fitness because that's important too, right? So we connect those two things together. So we'll do a 5K, we get sponsors, we charge, the race fee and all that kind of thing. And then all the money that we raise for that goes to prostate cancer advocacy.
So we're nearly to the end. I want to give you one more recommendation to all those people, males in particular, but also females supporting males and their husband or partners, is saying, what should they do to be proactive? Do not wait for signals or signs. Do investigations. Blood tests will show you PTSD. Is that the word for it?
PSA.
PSA.
Yep. And you can get that as early as 40 years old, and that's when they recommend. So the average recommendation is at age 50, you get your PSA. But if you suspect you have a family history or that you suspect any of those symptoms, like I said, frequent urination, not able to empty your bladder fully, or sexual dysfunction, it's probably because of an enlarged prostate, and you want to get that checked right away. Because if they catch it early, it's 99.9% curable and fixable. My case, we did catch it early, but it was also had really been enlarged. So we had a little bit of a hiccup there at the beginning. In fact, I've been 2 years in treatment now. My final treatment ends in June, this coming June. So I'm really excited about that.
So recommendation is being proactive.
Yes, you must be proactive with this, especially, I mean, in my case, like I said, I didn't have any symptoms. So that was a significant thing. So if you suspect it at all, please go get checked.
Frequency of occurrence issues, any idea?
Yep. You mean as far as the cancer itself?
Yeah, in the general sense, you know, so we're not doctors or we're not medical doctors.
Yeah, well, I know this. There's as many men who have prostate cancer as women who have breast cancer. Right. So 1 in 8 men will get prostate cancer, and men don't talk about it because, you know, there's shame involved in it because, you know, no man wants to go around talking about that I'm incontinent. No man wants to talk about I have sexual dysfunction. And because of that, there's an embarrassment that comes with it.
Extremely unfortunate. Yes. The same applies to ADHD and dyslexia. For me, I talk about it because I have an obligation to talk about it. I believe all those other things are so critically important. That's why I raised prostate cancer potential. And then 1 in 8, you are an example. You're very open about it. And I believe I encourage that because for all the people around the world watching us, it's not unique to Ohio or North America or the United States. It is around the world that are listening to. Be proactive in your health, your fitness, diet. We can do a whole podcast about that as well. Sports, and all of those things. And then the other things not to forget is, as we say about communication skills, between yourself and myself, Dr. Matt Kutz, is that we've never met before. I saw your bio just today, and here we have an amazing, from my experience, conversation about all these things and what is the foundation of interaction like this, podcasting around the world. That in our case, and I can say to you, because I mean it to be in a positive way, well over 1.1, nearly 1.2 million subscribers on my podcast, probably another million on other platforms as well, on YouTube 1.2 and a million of the other ones. We may have 2 or 3 million people watching us. That's not only about the topics that we're talking about, but also about communication skills. And the new media in the future is not CNNs and ABCs and all of those that they're going down. Podcasting is the future of communications around the world.
I agree.
Matt, Dr. Matt Kutz, tell us once more, where can we reach you? Show us again, where can we get your books?
So this is the book, Becoming Epic. It's on Amazon, any bookstores, you can find it there. If you want this or some of my other books, I've written 8 books. MatthewKutz.com is my website, and you can contact me there. I also have articles there, free resources there. But Matthew is Matthew, and then Kutz is spelled Kutz. Matter of fact, I'll put that up on the screen there, MatthewKutz.com.
And if it is appropriate, can I ask if you can send me a copy of a couple of your books that you think are important for me to watch, including the last one and the other ones that you believe are important? I'm going to send you some of the ones that we talked about as well, and I'm going to sign them for you. Great. Yeah, and then let's stay in touch, Matt.
Let's do it. I had fun. This is a great conversation.
Amazing podcast. I enjoy it very, very, very much. And as I indicated, we release the podcast as presented within 2 hours.
Awesome. Can't wait to see it.
Dr. Matt, it was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, John. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too. Take care. Bye.